Hello everyone, Jennifer L. Scott here and welcome to the Daily Connoisseur. I have Dr. Patty Tay back with us today to talk about intermittent fasting and correct portion sizes. You are not going to want to miss this video. Dr. Patty Tay is a board certified pediatrician and she specializes in this, so we have a real treat in store for us. As a disclaimer, if you are interested in intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating, please discuss it with your own doctor. This video is for entertainment purposes only. If you suffer from disordered eating or are triggered by these topics of portion sizes, I would also advise you to skip the video. But otherwise, I look forward to speaking with Dr. Patty Tay, and here we go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Connoisseur. And we have our very special guest, Dr. Patty Tay is back with us to discuss intermittent fasting and portion sizes. And I could not be more thrilled, Dr. Tay, to have you back on the Daily Connoisseur. So welcome.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for having me back.
Thank you. So let's talk today about portion sizes, because this is a question I get all the time. I share my what I eat in a day videos on YouTube. And they're not informed by anything. So no nutritionist, no doctor, and I want good advice too for what type of portion sizes I should be having. One thing I notice is that people see my portion sizes and they either have one or two reactions. They say, "Wow, I could never eat all that food." Or they say, "Your portions are so small, you eat like a bird." And I'm thinking, which one is it? So let's talk about portion sizes today. Take the lead.
Yes. So actually, I call this the number one reason why intermittent fasting or any diet plan does not work. Because I have patients come in and say, yeah, they only eat like 2 meals a day. They're eating over 4 hours and that's it. And they're not losing any weight. And if we actually sit down and talk about it, it usually is because their portions are not correct. They're eating too much at each meal. So I'm not a nutritionist. I'm just a general pediatrician and obesity medicine specialist, but we do just have some general guidelines for weight and portions. And I'm going to be taking my data from the US Department of Health and Human Services. If you can show that first slide I have, it's going to be called the daily calorie needs based on age, gender, and activity level. And I know that most of your viewers are going to be in the 19 to kind of 50-year range, and mostly female. So I actually circled that age group in blue for you guys. And if you look, it says that females are allotted about 1,800 to 2,000 calories a day in that age group. And for men, it's something around 2,400. And if you look at the numbers, I chose the sedentary group because the truth is most of us are sedentary. When you look at the data for moderately active, which is the next category of calories, that's talking at least 10,000 steps a day. And I don't know if you count steps, but that's not really easy to meet for somebody who works in an office. I think I get like 3,000 when I'm at the office. And then if you look at the last category where it says active, that's really 60 minutes of activity 5 times a week for kids. And that's breathless, kind of sweating activity. And so, not many of us are getting that kind of level.
Right.
And then before we go on to the next slide, I just wanted to quickly point out, if you look at the sedentary versus very active category, you only get something like 200 to 400 extra calories, even if you're really working out like an hour every day. So when patients say, "Oh, I can eat what I want because I work out a lot," I usually say it probably isn't going to work out that way, because 200 calories is like a glass of milk and an apple. It's not an exercise of pizza. And so, and the science really does say, if you really want to lose weight, exercise only is never going to be enough. It's really going to be kind of timing your meals and also portion sizes. Okay.
Oh, that's so good to know.
Yes. And so then if you want to see the next slide, it's going to talk about daily amounts of each food group based on calorie needs. And again, I circled the blue portion where it's the 1,800 to 2,000 calorie range. And this is the part that makes us all really, really sad, because it says our grain portion is 6 ounces for the day and our protein food portion is about 5 ounces for the day. And if you look at the fine print on the bottom, they're going to say half a cup of cooked rice or pasta is equivalent to 1 ounce. So if we get a cup of rice or pasta, which is kind of about this much, I have a little cup here measure for you, and I can put it in here to show you. It's really only that much. That's your entire carb portion for one meal, be it lunch or dinner or breakfast. And then if you look at the protein portion, we usually say a deck of cards is a 3-ounce portion. It's really this thin and this big, and we're allotted 5 ounces for the day. So it's not even 2 of these, it's like 1.5 of these. So
Right.
that's kind of your dinner and your lunch. It's very little, right?
Yes. Yeah, it is little, but I have so many questions. I'm going to let you keep going, and then I'll ask all my questions.
Yeah, interrupt me. Yeah, interrupt me. So, and I always have props in my office to show my patients, because something has happened. Just food is so abundant that we think of food kind of in the wrong scale. Like I do a little snack portion. My kids love spicy potato chips. And so even for their lunches, I've started to kind of think about how much they're supposed to get. So this is a 1 ounce, 30-gram portion, which is about what a snack size should be. It's very small. Like if I eat out of the bag, I cannot stop at this much. I have to portion it out before I start eating, right?
Well, that's a very good tip right there, to portion your food out before you start eating, because a lot of people will take the bag of chips on the sofa and mindlessly watch television. And how many portions do you have when you do that? You don't even know. You can't measure it. So that's very good.
And I always tell the patients, look at the back where it has the serving sizes, and it'll tell you usually that one bag is like 8 servings. You're supposed to eat it the whole week.
Yes.
right. And so just our concept of food is just changing. I like to do it like, sweet portions. Like a treat is actually this piece of chocolate right here. That's 70 calories. And if I do 2 pieces, that is all the treat I get for the day, because that's 150 calories right there.
Okay.
Right. Isn't that sad?
It is. I think that this can be discouraging for people. However, I also want to bring encouragement, because what I've noticed from my long-term intermittent fasting, which, by the way, I want to talk to you about the difference between intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating, because I know we were going to make that definition clear. But real quick, before we get into that, I noticed, because I've been doing it for almost 2 years now, that it's like it's cleaned up my entire system and also my cravings. So when I portion my meals and I show them, I think my meal portions are good. I'm thinking, looking at the what you're showing us here, I'm thinking I'm not having too much and I'm not having too little. I think I'm right around the right age, but a range. But a lot of people look at that and they think that's not that much food. But when you do the intermittent fasting, it cleans up these crazy cravings, and that is enough for you. And I don't know if it shrinks your stomach or what it does, but it that fills me up now. So I'm looking at these portions and I'm thinking this is all good, but some people might be looking at them and thinking, oh no, I could never do that.
Right. You know what? That is a fantastic question. And I'm going to address that. Actually, let me do one more visual, because I think this is probably more helpful for everybody. So, the portions that the Health and Human Services put forth is like for everybody, but that's actually really not very fair, because I'm a much smaller person than my husband, and he couldn't eat the portions that I eat. And also my patients are all different sizes as well. So one of the tricks that we have learned is to use your own body size as a measurement for how much you're supposed to eat. Okay. So for grain servings, I usually recommend using your own fist. Like for my hand, this is about right. And I would say this is actually even too much for my carb portion, right? Isn't that interesting? And for reference, I'm about 5'4" and 120 pounds. And then for my protein portion, we say use your palm, but use without the fingers. Because that's about 3 ounces for me. And this is too big, right? See how this is a little bit too big for my palm. So I need a little bit less protein than that. And that's probably about right. And so when I tell my patients, and see, I even plated this for you. I have a little piece of china here. This is your standard dinner plate. Yeah. And I say, divide your plate up into a sideways T. And then you're going to put your protein portion right here. Just visually kind of measure it out. And that's the palm of your hand. And then plate your carb portion right here. And that's going to be kind of the size of your fist. and just start with that. That's your first serving. And then obviously this whole mystery area, I'm sure you can guess what that's going to be.
Vegetables, right?
Yeah,
As many vegetables as you can.
as many, yes. Yes, and I always remind patients, vegetables are free. We don't count them. It says, recommended 4 cups, but it's actually really hard to get to 4 cups of fruits and vegetables a day, even when, you're really conscious about it. Right. And so I tell my patients, get your U-size portion and start with that and enjoy that piece. As you always say, enjoy your food, sit down, and don't feel guilty about eating your portion that you're allotted. Now, in the beginning, like you were saying too, it's not easy to stop at that correct portion because our bodies are used to eating more. And we'll talk about that in a second. Okay. And so then I will tell my patients, you know what? Try to go back and get another serving of your vegetables because those are free. And then allot yourself a little bit more of your carb or your protein or whatever it is you're craving. But the second time you go back, that you're already exceeding your portion and you want to be a little bit more careful and really enjoying that bite, not just kind of, satisfying hunger. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And I say that to my children because, on their plate, we'll have the vegetables, the protein, the carb, and then depending on who they are, they'll eat all of the protein and they'll say, can I have more? I'll say, well, after you eat all your vegetables, and if you're still hungry, yes, then you can have more, So yes, I'm like, don't skip the vegetables. You could fill up on vegetables, right. But it's just about your palate and everything. So that's great.
Right. And it also goes the flip side. I have patients come in that have super picky eaters and they feel like their kids are not eating anything and they get very worried. And then I'll bring the child and say, okay, let's look at this child's palm and then the size of their fist and say, are they eating that portion of carbs a day? Are they eating that portion of protein a day? And a lot of times the parents realize, you know what, they really do. It's just that they're so small and we're just not used to that small portion for them, but that's the right portion for them, right? So,
yes, because we're giving them probably the same portion size that we're having, and we can't expect them to eat the same thing that we do.
Exactly.
So that's good.
Yeah, exactly. And then we also talk about picky eating. I know this is nothing to do with intermittent fasting, but picky eaters, if we give them generous carbohydrate or protein portions, that seem like it's a small portion from an adult's point of view, but really bigger than the size of their palm, they're just not going to eat the vegetables because they're not hungry. There's no space for the vegetables to go in.
Right. That's true. Yeah. Okay. That's good to know.
So going back to the portion size and fasting, so my patients will say when they try this, they are so hungry for the first kind of 30 days or so initially. And they have to really make a conscious effort to do kind of, this T shape and staying within these borders for their portions. And I usually tell them it does take really about 3 months to adjust and really a full year before your portions really reset. Like I think kind of you were saying, because you've done this for a year now.
Almost 2 years.
2 years now, right?
Yeah.
So there's a couple of reasons why. I think our natural instinct is to think of hunger as needing food, like that contraction in your stomach as needing food. And if you think of it scientifically, it's not really that we need food when we feel our hunger pangs. It's actually just the hormones are released in our body signaling us, hey, you ate yesterday at this time, and this is how much you ate yesterday. So you should do the same thing.
Oh, that's good to think about.
Isn't that cool? And so
yes.
if we miss that meal, then, our stomach is empty and we don't have that volume of food, it's just going to feel awful. We're going to feel miserable. But as we talked about with intermittent fasting, as we wait those 4 hours and not eat constantly all day, our stomachs start to kind of say, okay, I guess I'm not supposed to eat then. And we don't get that kind of hunger pains and then kind of, it gets better and better over time.
That completely explains the phenomenon that I experienced where I no longer have those late night cravings, because for me, it was that 11 o'clock bowl of cereal or 10 o'clock bowl of cereal. Once I cut that out, my body was no longer reminding me at that time, hey, you're missing your bowl of cereal.
Right.
That makes so much sense. And it also makes sense with why I've always had the same portion sizes. I've never changed that. I've always kept the same rather small portion sizes. So that's good. But it works for me. So do you have any other tips on portion sizes? I know we were communicating privately and you mentioned even the meal kit services. It's worth doing maybe once just to even see what proper portion sizes are. Could you talk about that?
Yes. So I do have a lot of patients who come in who purchase their meals outside, fast food or eating at a restaurant. And the portions are so distorted that to talk about a normal portion size is really difficult for them. And so one of the tips that I do have is say, I recommend, meal kits are very expensive, obviously,
Mhm.
than preparing it yourself. But as a treat, it might not be a bad idea. And if you can show the slides, I have a couple of pictures of meal kits. My daughter got these as a present for Christmas because she wanted to kind of learn how to cook. And so I took pictures and I usually show these to my patients because I have a fork there and the plate is still the same plate as I have shown you earlier in this video, kind of how that plates. And if you look at the last picture, it actually is my daughter. She's giving you a thumbs up. And yeah, and you can see, look at her thumb and the protein and the
Mhm.
carb portions that are plated on her plate. You can see it's one carb portion. That's the fist size portion. She probably has a little bit more generous than she's supposed to be eating. But she's a growing girl, so I'll let
Yes.
that slide. And then the protein portion, I have to say, that day my husband wasn't home. And so my kids stole all of his meatballs. And so it's supposed to be actually three meatballs, three, or I think it was four meatballs is one portion. And that would probably be about the size of her palm. And I know a common complaint reviewers have about these meal kits is that the meat portion is ridiculously small and they felt
Mhm.
hungry after eating it.
Mhm.
And we have to remember when they make these meal kits, they have a nutritionist calculating kind of the calories based on the recommendations from the Health and Human Services. Um, and so actually the meal kit portion is correct. And then if you look at the vegetable portion, it does cover almost half of her plate. And I think the tomatoes I had added and she didn't take many, I would hope she'd taken a little bit more, but still it's kind of half the plate. And so that's kind of a better way to visualize what I should be eating, you know.
I think that's a great tip because I've used meal kits many times in the past and I noticed that. And I thought these are perfect for portion sizing because it seems like a small amount of food, but it's correct. As you said, it's the correct amount
Mhm.
that you're supposed to be eating. So I think that's a really good tip.
Now, I have one more visual for you. I
Okay.
have a favorite food too, and I'm gonna tell you, it's actually pizza. I borrowed this from my local pizza delivery guys. So this
Love
is a
it.
regular large size pizza, and I even made a fake pizza inside for you.
Oh,
So
great. Perfect.
it's 8 slices, and if you see, I hear kids go, "Oh, I can eat like half the pie myself." So actually, if I look at the single slice, and I looked at my portion size, since my carb portion is really kind of only about this big, if the pizza is really this thin, I get to have one slice of pizza. If I crumple this up, it's probably about the same size, right?
Okay.
But if this is a thick crust pizza, the reality of portion size is actually I only get to eat like half of the pizza. You know what I mean? If I think about kind of my fist size. And so, I will plate this and I would try to keep it to kind of this quarter of the plate and then just make sure that I have some kind of a protein. So usually we'll order like buffalo wings or something like that to go with it. And then make sure that this portion is my salad, and start there. And sometimes I will tell you, I will sneak in kind of an extra half a slice of a pizza, but I know once I've gone over the slice, everything extra is extra and I should really not be eating that extra slice.
Okay. Well, that's very helpful. Now, I have a quick question. What do you do?
Sure.
Because I start to get I mean, I feel like I'm in a good place. I don't really think too much about I'm not measuring things. I feel like I'm in a good place where I know the correct portion sizes I should be eating. But what do you tell people who are intimidated by this, might obsess over it a little bit in an unhealthy way? What's a good way rather than us thinking too much about it to just have healthy portion sizes in general and
Mhm.
live our lives without worrying too much about it? Do you have any tips for that?
Sure. And that's one of the reasons why I don't encourage diets where they say, okay, these are your calories. And, when you start to calculate and measure and weigh calories,
Mhm.
it
Yes.
can become an obsession. I know some people
Yes.
become really good at it. And we do want to talk about, eating disorders can occur at any size. It's not only that 90-pound girl. We can have normal sized people who are still pretty obsessed over food. And I think if we can train our minds to see what a proper portion should look like, it's not like, oh, we went over by 50% that one day and now it's ruined, right?
Mm,
It's just
right.
kind of right,
It's
like for you too. Some days,
yeah.
right? Some days you have more pasta than normal, and that's
Yes.
okay because you still know how much pasta you're supposed to be eating, right?
Yes. It's just reset it the next day, just do better the next time and not beat yourself up over it. And I think it's about going back to, in our last conversation, we talked about the past and how in the past, let's say in the 1950s, for example, it was just standard. Everybody kind of had the same portion sizes. There weren't these overinflated portion sizes. So I think that's what it is. It's just about being sensible, not beating yourself up over it, realizing this is the correct portion size. And, tomorrow I'll try to aim for that. And I think being very present while you're eating, paying attention to what you're eating, and when you're actually full is important. If you're sitting in front of the television, you're not going to pay attention when you're full or what you're eating, like we mentioned with the snacks. So I think that that's all very good advice.
Right. And I know you talk about taking your time to eat your meal, because if we eat it quickly, those hormones haven't normalized to say, stop contracting in the stomach. I'm full, right? Let's talk about restaurants. So one of the tips that I, tell my patients too is, if you're going to be eating at a restaurant, do the same thing. Divide up your plate mentally and portion yourself 1/5 of carbs and then your portion of protein, and see what's left on the plate. And you'll realize, oh, wow, this was supposed to be for 3 people. It is not a single person portion.
Yes.
Right. So.
Okay, that's good advice. And before we close, I did want to talk about the difference between intermittent fasting and time restricted eating, because I know you brought that up in our conversation. Can you tell me, what is the difference there?
So intermittent fasting, in kind of the scientific way they describe it, is kind of when you don't eat for days, or long periods.
Okay.
And kind of traditionally they do the 2-5 schedule, where you eat for 5 days and you fast for 2 days completely. Or you can do an alternate day fasting schedule, where you eat one day and you don't eat the next day, 24 hours straight. So to be scientifically, technically correct, what you are doing is kind of time restricted fasting. It's not true intermittent fasting. But I guess kind of when we're using it, we really mean time restricted fasting, right? Which is more biological, right?
Perfect. I wanted to clarify that too. And I use intermittent fasting in my titles because that's the word that people understand. That's the buzzword that comes in, but that's good to know. And of course, we talked about in our last interview that the time restricted eating is the most sensible one. We're not talking about extremes with going days without eating and all of that. So
Right. And intermittent fasting, where you're not eating for 2 days and you eat for 5 days, so forth. It is possible. We can do it biologically. Or the alternate day fasting, where you eat one day and you don't eat one day. They are all possible. But in general, science finds that people can't do it for a long period. About a year is as far as people will get. Yeah. Whereas when you do time restricted fasting, like what you're doing, as you already know, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, you can do this indefinitely, because it's not just a shock to your system or something that's really inconvenient for life, right?
Right. I find that too. And I plan to. So I just love the lifestyle. So, well, thank you so much, Dr. Tay. Was there anything else you wanted to tell us about portion sizes before we go?
No, I think it's just really hard. I just want to remind your viewers, any kind of change, be it time restricted eating, or portion sizes, it's all very difficult because we've lived a certain way. And I do think that, to encourage people, I would say the time restriction is probably easier to follow. And if that's doable, start there. And then once you've mastered that and you still are not seeing kind of the scale budge, then the second step I would recommend is to kind of start to do portion. But this is not a strict diet. I don't say you get these calories and you don't. You try it and kind of reset your mind. And if you need a little bit more, go for seconds. It's okay. Go, but know kind of what the boundaries are, and say, I'm going to just overstep a little bit because I need that for today. And over time, as you yourself said, it gets better and easier, and our bodies just kind of change too.
Wonderful. Well, you are such a fountain of knowledge. I feel so grateful that you give the Daily Connoisseur audience your time. So I just want to thank you so much again for being here on the channel and for sharing your knowledge with us.
My pleasure, Jennifer.
Thank you, Dr. Tay.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Dr. Patty Tay. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Daily Connoisseur. Keep calm and remain classy, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.
you.